Wow, you guys, I really enjoyed Superman.
You're a shill.
What?
Who paid you for this review?
Okay, what if I said this? I really enjoyed Man of Steel.
This man is speaking the truth.
Oh,
What a totally honest review.
okay, that tracks. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today we're getting into my spoiler-free thoughts on James Gunn's Superman, which hits theaters this weekend, July 11th. And as you know, I did see this movie, and I gave you my out-of-theater reaction, and I'm on the record, and I'm gonna say this again. This film is great, okay? I'm gonna get into my reasons of why I think it's great, my positives, and yes, it's not foolproof, so I do have some negatives to discuss, and then we'll get into my final thoughts. But before we even get started, if this is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James. We've recently upgraded the space, and we're still doing some renovations. So stick with me on this journey, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and like this video, whether you're a fan of James Gunn or Superman or both or not, because I want to hear your thoughts. Now, I will say, I've been getting a lot of people in my comments saying they hate the film based on the trailer. I was going to say that one time, you guys. You can't hate something that you haven't watched yet. But we're going to get into it. Regardless, I want to know your thoughts when you see it this weekend in theaters. I was able to see this early for a review thanks to Warner Brothers Pictures in IMAX at my local AMC, and it was beautiful. Oh my goodness. Seeing this in IMAX really adds another layer to the film. Seeing it in regular, standard cinema is fine, but IMAX is, in my opinion, where it's at. So without further ado, let's get into this movie, what it's about, if you're unfamiliar with this version of Superman. The movie is directed and written by James Gunn, and it stars a huge cast led by David Corenswet, who plays Clark Kent, or Superman. We have Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, and Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. And I ain't gonna front, you guys, I did not really know about Mr. Terrific before this movie, and well, I came to love him. More on that in a little bit. So, this film is very heavily inspired by All-Star Superman, a comic that is very, very popular in the legacy of Superman. But the film itself, it does some things a little bit differently than your traditional Superman film. In this take on Superman, Clark Kent must reconcile with his alien Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing as reporter Clark Kent. As the embodiment of truth, justice, and the human way, he soon finds himself in a world that views these as old-fashioned. And I had a lot of people in my comments saying, it's the American way. But you know what? They write human way in the synopsis for a reason. And that reason is made very explicitly clear in the film. Superman's for everybody, y'all. Okay, so let's get into my positives, because I'm excited to elaborate on why I believe with my whole heart, and I say this with full confidence, James Gunn's Superman is the greatest Superman film put on the big screen. Now, to give you some context, I liked the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie just fine, and the sequel, I did not like it very much. I found Man of Steel to be good. I liked it better than most, and I, of course, didn't like Batman vs. Superman too much at all. Director's cut was a little bit better, but still, I found that Superman was just not really right on the big screen until this film, where James Gunn truly understands the character like no other director or writer has in the past. This film embodies everything about Superman that I believe he should be. He's a perfect depiction on screen of loving thy neighbor and laying down one's life for one's friends. And I find it funny because there's like a crowd that hates this version of Superman because they feel like he's quote unquote soft, but like he's supposed to be soft, and soft is strong. So like, what are we doing here, guys? You want someone that's just gonna go and kill somebody? That actually might have triggered somebody. But I will say, this version of Superman it hits on every note for me. There's hope, there's optimism, and relatable struggles for me as a viewer, and it just goes to show that James Gunn completely understands the character. Now, there's one thing I was surprised about in this movie, and that's the amount of humor that's injected into the film, because I think we're so used to Zack Snyder's most recent take on Superman, which is very grim and bleak. But here, there's a nice bit of levity. I found myself genuinely laughing often in this film, and that's a testament to, in my opinion, how much the movie feels like a comic book. It's lighthearted when it needs to be, but it's also heavy emotionally at the right times. I will say, I got emotional for my very first time in a Superman film. I love the character in comics, but on screen I never really got emotional until one particular scene with his dad. I'm talking about Pa Kent, But boy, it was good. And when it comes to the immersion of the movie, the reason why this is head and shoulders above every other Superman movie is due in large part to the flying sequences. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, like flying sequence, who cares? There's technology that wasn't so great back then, and there's better technology now. You can't judge that. I can, because this was either going to really work or really break the film, because I did see, I think, a clip in one of the trailers, and it didn't look too great in terms of the angle of him flying, but in the final product, the flying sequences blew my mind. I mean, yes, it helps that I saw it in IMAX, but the way it's shot, you feel like you're flying with Superman. It's visceral. There's a great deal of sound design, and I mean, shout out to David Corenswet, who was the lead sound designer here on the film. He also worked on Andor, so that tracks. But everything sort of just blends together perfectly, not just in the flying sequences, but in every scene for me to feel completely immersed into the film. I mean, there was a moment during the first flight sequence that we see in the film. I turned to my buddy Austin and I was like, they're doing it. And just a heads up, if you are not good with hearing bones crack or flesh and stuff like that, you just be expectant that you might get triggered a little bit. I'm glad I wasn't eating any Twizzlers. I want some now. All right, let's move on to my next reason as to why Superman is so darn great. And for me, you take more of the technical aspects into effect when you come into a Superman movie. I'm looking for the cinematography. I'm listening for the score, and both of those delivered. The first Donner film, in my opinion, aced it in the cinematography category, and Snyder's Man of Steel also looked beautiful at times. Now, in this Superman movie, I can't say the cinematography is a 5 out of 5 all the way through, but there are specific moments that I told myself I would love this hanging on my wall. And it happens to be that the cinematography is the most consistent among any of the other Superman movies as well. And what I loved is that in every action sequence in this film, you can track it. You can really see what's going on. Every single blow that Superman's landing, or the engineer throwing her nanite saw hands around. It's so dope that we can see all of it. And it feels like you're in the room with them. I also appreciated that each scene, in a way, felt like its own. It was very unique. When you go to Kansas, it's pretty dope, and I thought that it looked nice. Like, that felt like the most filmy location compared to Metropolis, but both really have such a great feel to them. And when it comes to the music, composers John Murphy and David Fleming helmed the score here, and let me tell y'all, I went home and I immediately thought, okay, please drop this early on Apple Music. They won't do that. It'll come out Friday morning, I'm sure. But wow, the score was really effective here. And what I loved is that it was epic for Superman and his friends, but it also had a very distinct approach for the villains. So there was a motif that you hear often, especially in the first half of the movie, for our villains. And I liked it. Whenever Lex was on screen, you hear it in the background. It just felt like there was an identity given to this movie due in large part to the music. And of course, when you come into a James Gunn movie, on the superhero side, yes, you have to expect soundtracks to be solid. Like, needle drops here were very intentional, and I like that. There were some songs I've never heard before in this movie, but it fit for the scene, especially when the film ends. The song choice, I thought, that's different, but it works for the movie. So I thought that James Gunn did a good job at picking these songs, and I hope there's a playlist because, Guardians of the Galaxy mixtapes went hard in the paint. But when it comes to Superman, there were some pretty darn cool songs, and this talk about punk rock throughout the film, so you get that approach sometimes too. And speaking of James Gunn, yes, he wrote the film, and we got to talk about the script, which a lot of people are a little mixed on. But for me, I love the writing, at least for the most part. There's maybe one or two nitpicks I have with the script, But while on paper it might seem bloated, because yes, there are a lot of characters that need to be introduced in this movie to really start the DCU, it felt very complete. It's weird because usually this is something that I'm not a fan of, where directors will just try to use one movie as the vehicle to open up a whole new connected universe. But it was done very well in Superman. I also love the decision to not give us yet another Superman origin film. I mean, we've seen enough of it, right? Gosh, Peter Parker getting bit by the spider. We get it. Like, we know what happens. So instead, the film hits the ground running. And we actually open with establishing shots, snowy landscapes, and text on screen that catches us up to speed, literally to the very moment that we're about to be placed in. And you know what? It worked. I was a little, skeptical at first. I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot of text. But the reason they did that is because James Gunn's telling a different Superman story that we're sort of accustomed to not seeing, which is, it's not an origin. We're being placed right in the action. And I love that. And I said it once, and I'll say it again. I appreciate that James Gunn made this feel like a comic book brought to life on the big screen. You can tell that this is a very authentic take on Superman. There's heart, there's passion put into this project, and it does ooze onto the screen. So yes, the authenticity of this movie just radiates, and I felt it. And I mean, I can't say it enough, but James Gunn really was the perfect pick for this film. Now I want to get to the cast, because guys, the casting in this film is quite honestly perfect. And I don't say that often, especially in an ensemble. There's maybe someone that isn't cast correctly, but they took their time on this one. And let me tell you, getting David Corenswet as Superman was a great choice. He is literally exactly who you would expect on screen. He's kind, he's soft, loving, caring. He's aggressive when he needs to be. He's just so thoughtful. He's selfless. He's literally everything you want out of a Superman. There were also moments where you can tell David Corenswet has the chops, especially in a conversation with Lois early on in the movie. But you also have to give props to Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. Without Rachel Brosnahan in this movie, I do not think Lois Lane would be as impactful as a character. In previous versions of Superman, Lois Lane just kind of feels there. Amy Adams, I think, did the best job as Lois before Rachel Brosnahan, but Rachel Brosnahan, to me, has a very good mix of being hard-nosed. She's a great journalist. She also has some things she's got to deal with, past relational trauma, and maybe just looking inward and having more confidence in herself. So I kind of like that they balance all of that very well in this movie. But then when you put David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan together in the same room, their chemistry is off the charts. Listen, I think that they're a great pairing, and from the very first time we see them kiss on screen, I'm thinking, well, goodness, this was just a match made in superhero heaven. Because wow, I was pretty shocked at how well they were meshing so early on in the movie, and it just carries forth throughout the rest of the film. But then we got our villains to talk about, led by Nicholas Hoult, who plays Lex Luthor. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Nicholas Hoult I've already loved before this movie, and then he comes in and plays Lex Luthor. Guys, this Lex Luthor, I'm getting so excited just talking about it, because he's one of the best comic book villains brought to the big screen, thanks in large part to Nicholas Hoult. Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor wasn't bad, but I feel like Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, you see the progression of him going more and more insane with power and his want to kill Superman. And by the end, there's a final shot of Lex Luthor, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're nailing this character. And I'm excited to see the evolution of this character as the DCU continues. But he was just awesome. He stole scenes. He's one of the 2 scene stealers, I would say, in this movie. And whenever he's on screen, you feel the gravity of his performance. It's just incredible. And he's, in my opinion, long overdue for many awards, because Nicholas Hoult is an amazing talent in Hollywood. So we're going to go from one character you love to hate in Lex Luthor to some supporting cast members that I really grew to love. And it starts with Eddie Gathegi, who plays Mr. Terrific. I knew zero about this character before sitting down to watch Superman. I didn't even know whether he was a hero or a villain. At one point, I thought the marketing made it look like he was going to be a villain. I don't know why. But when you sit down and you get first introduced to Mr. Terrific, immediately, the man captures your attention. He's got awesome screen presence. He is hilarious. His comedic timing is pretty darn perfect in this movie. But he also gets a lot of screen time. And it's warranted because he makes the best of it, whether it be using T-spheres in a universe, I'm not going to continue on that point, or whether it be him in with the Justice Gang, having just playful banter back and forth, and he's just controlling the moment. Eddie Gathegi is just, he's so good in this movie, and I just cannot wait to see him come back as Mr. Terrific. He better. But on my rewatches for Superman, I just know I'm going to fall more and more in love with this performance. And then there's Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, a member of the Green Lantern Corps, and he's just very, very good yet again. He's always been pretty darn consistent. I've loved him since Firefly, and I can't tell you that he is giving you like a crazy award-winning performance in this movie, but he's not being asked to do that. Instead, kind of butts heads with Superman sometimes and teases him. And I like that. And within that playful banter, he also has a great deal of humor that he injects just by the way he looks and he sounds and his mannerisms. Just works for me. And I didn't think I'd love that bowl cut, but it was fine. And then there's Isabella Merced, who rounds out our Justice Gang. She plays Hawkgirl, and Hawkgirl is a character I'm a little unfamiliar with, but for the most part in this movie, I thought she did a really solid job. And Isabella Merced is very talented anyway. Completely stole the show in Last of Us Season 2. She was great in Dora the Explorer, and I really love her here. I can say, though, she does get the short end of the stick of the three, so hopefully we do get a little bit more of her and maybe a little bit more development as the DCU goes on. And you can't mention the supporting cast without mentioning actor Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen. Listen, Jimmy Olsen, known to be a dork, right? But Skylar brings a swagger to him. You know, he's got like workers at the Metropolis looking at him and fawning over him like, dang, Jimmy, yeah. Little do they know though, I'm not gonna get into that. But I thought Jimmy Olsen was really darn good in this role. He is somewhat of a goofball, but he also becomes very important in the third act of this movie. So I'm a very big fan of the performance here. And yeah, I have to, of course, even though it's like CGI for the most part, I'll mention this character, and that's Crypto, Superman's dog. I mean, this dog is so darn adorable and reminds me very much of my very first dog. So James Gunn, thanks for making me completely emotional in this movie. But Crypto is awesome, hilarious, does everything you'd expect a dog to do. And when it comes to the superpowers, at times, Crypto is a main character in this film. And I really love that. I also think Crypto is going to be the bridge for casual moviegoers who will see Superman this weekend. Because if there's one thing moviegoers love, is a cute dog that kicks butt when it comes to the bad guys. Alrighty, y'all. So it's time to get into my negatives, because not saying that this movie is, got a ton of negatives, but it's not foolproof like I mentioned. So let's begin with my very first negative here, which is the fact that for a few moments, brief moments in Superman, I did feel like the conversations were going in a circle. And that's not to say that this movie is fully exposition. It's not. They do a lot of show, not as much tell as you maybe are hearing some people complain about. But I will say that this film unfortunately gets in its own way sometimes, because they're trying very hard to bring this movie down to a very humane level. So dialogue, conversation, and for the most part it works, because in the first act, within like the first 30 minutes of this movie, we get a nearly 10-minute conversation between Lois and Clark, and I loved it. But there were some conversations after that I thought, okay, we don't need to really linger like we did in that scene. We can maybe get past this, or we can move on a little bit faster from this conversation. I think it's James Gunn trying to make these characters very relatable and human, which is fine, and I get that. I just didn't feel like the movie needed some of these sidetracked conversations to happen on screen. And I was also scared initially about how many pieces were being thrown into the film. And I will say, for the most part, it did work for me. Almost perfectly, actually. But there were one or two nitpicks that I have in this department. Do I feel the script is bloated? On paper, yes, this is what I would consider a bloated script, but in execution, no. The film is not bloated. I thought that they used this movie as a vehicle to introduce characters in a very effective way. It just stinks that a couple characters who were introduced that I actually ended up loving were not really given a fair share of screen time, like Wendell Pierce, an on-screen legend who plays Perry White, the editor-in-chief at the newspaper in Metropolis where Clark Kent and Lois work at. He has maybe one moment where I'm like, that is Perry White and I love it. But then we just really don't get him for most of the movie after that. So it was kind of tough to just see him get a little sidelined. But again, not a make or break for me because there's more to come. So maybe there's more Perry White to come. I also thought it was interesting to basically go away from Lois Lane quite a bit in the second half of the film, most notably in that second act. But in a way, it makes sense because it's a Superman movie. We've already established Lois Lane and him have a good relationship. And, well, Lois Lane gets a lot of screen time in the first act. So for them to go away from her in the second act, some fans might not like that. But for me, I understood it. It just, you had that thought. At least I had that thought. Where's Lois? And again, I will say, Isabella Merced, I wish she had a little bit more of a role to play in the Justice Gang. Not saying she had no role. It just felt like, okay, she's being left behind a little bit. So we get a little bit of, character development, just a very little bit based on where she's at before they have a final act sequence. She's in her room and you're thinking, okay, this is a little bit of personality here. But other than that, they kind of leave her off to the side as well. And my last negative here, again, kind of a nitpick, but I have to be honest with you guys. I do wish the film wouldn't move as fast as Superman. We know this man faster than the speed of light, but this is truly a fast-paced 2-hour movie because they're going from scene to scene quickly. They need to establish a lot. And at times I thought, okay, it would be nice to linger here. It would be nice to let what just happened feel like it's emotionally weighted and there's a lot that the audience can sit with. They got to move on. I get it. But especially in the first act, I thought, man, this movie's moving, bro. Like, let's slow it down just a little. But overall, you guys, my final thoughts on James Gunn's Superman is, well, it's pretty darn great. I have zero things to hate about this film. It is just one of the best superhero movies I've seen in terms of opening up a universe in a very long time. And also, it is the greatest Superman movie put on the big screen. This just gets me so excited for the DCU and James Gunn and Peter Safran's vision for what's ahead. Have I watched Creature Commandos? No, I know that was kind of like an unofficial kickoff for the DCU. But for me, as a fan of Superman and him being my second favorite superhero, I am just grinning from ear to ear. I left the theater feeling elevated. Like I was like floating, bro. I thought this is just one of the best theatrical experiences of not only the summer but of the year. And man, it's definitely in my top 3 of the year so far. It is just such a great movie. I'd give it 4.5 out of 5 capes. And I can't tell you enough that this film deserves to be watched in a theater, but also the movie itself is going to prove a lot of people wrong. Now, there are those who have the preconceived notions like, James Gunn, I'm not watching it. You know who you are. But I will say, James Gunn's Superman is just nearly perfect, man. It is so darn good. And I am just over the moon with what we got on the big screen. And I cannot wait to watch this movie again and again and again. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of Superman, which is in theaters July 11th. So when you see it, let me know in the comments below what you think. Subscribe to the channel too if you haven't already for more reviews, out of theater reactions, and so much more this summer and beyond. And hey, you guys, thanks so much for your support and helping this happen. I'm getting new posters soon. I'm getting a Dragon Prince poster as well. We got so much to add to the set. Let me know what you want to see too if you have any thoughts, but I'm so pumped to be doing this together. Alrighty, y'all. Well, I'm gonna go book my tickets for Superman at hopefully the crowd who likes to pick on people for loving this movie doesn't come at me again. If they do, I'm ready. I'm stretching. Alrighty, well again, thanks so much for watching. God bless you guys, and I'll catch you at the next screening.